Welcome to first talk of track 3 on Sunday. We're gonna get started, but fun fact, Kenny here knows all the words to Rosie the Response Mode.
It's a children's book.
That's what he said. Anyways, please help me welcome Kenny and Nick. There you go.
Good morning and welcome to From Shanghai to Shore, the silent threat in global shipping. I'm Kenny Miltenberger and this is Nick Fredericksen, and let's jump right into it. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a brief introduction of ourselves and the Coast Guard, and then we're going to talk about cranes, why they're important, what they are, and what we're doing to protect them, and maybe some lessons we've learned along the way. But first, who are we? I am Lieutenant Commander Kenny Miltenberger. I'm the commanding officer of the 2003 Cyber Protection Team located in Alameda, California. Before that, I founded the Coast Guard's Red Team and did some fun development work for Naval Sea Systems Command, or NAVSEA.
And I'm Lieutenant Commander Nick Fredericksen. I'm commanding officer for 1790 Cyber Protection Team. Prior to that, I helped found the Coast Guard Cyber Maritime Readiness Branch, which is the Coast Guard's primary liaisons with maritime industry for all things cybersecurity.
But first, you're probably asking yourself, the Coast Guard does cyber? I thought they guard the coast from like angry crustaceans and rescue distressed boaters with Kevin Costner and Ashton Kutcher. And while those things are definitely true, we're actually an armed force with a number of important missions, including border security, enabling maritime commerce, and disaster and contingency response. And of course, we do cyber. So in Coast Guard Cyber Command, there are 3 main buckets of work that we do. The first is defending our own networks. This is done by our red teams, our blue teams, our security watch. The second is defending the marine transportation system, which is what we do. And the third is defending the nation and protecting U.S. interests against malicious cyber actors, which is done by our national mission team. And outside of Coast Guard Cyber Command, there's a whole regulatory piece to the Coast Guard, where we even passed the first maritime cyber regulation. And as part of an effort called Force Design 2028, the largest transformation in our service's history, we are growing our cyber forces and expanding to meet future threats. But first, how did we get here? Back in 2013 and reaffirmed in 2024, all of the critical infrastructure sectors in the United States were divided up and assigned a government sector risk management agency, so to help defend them in cyberspace. So what you see here is a breakout of the transportation system sector, which includes important things like aviation and freight rail, but also includes the marine transportation system, or MTS, of which the Coast Guard is a co-sector risk management agency. And so the MTS, Marine Transportation System, are all the ports, facilities, and associated infrastructure that enable approximately $5.4 trillion of commerce in the United States every year. And importantly, cheap, reliable maritime trade is the foundational underpinning of our globalized world. Nearly everything relies upon it.
So you heard Kenny mention our Protect the Marine Transportation System mission. Our primary method for doing that is our Coast Guard Cyber Protection Teams. Coast Guard has 4 cyber protection teams, 3 active duty and 1 reserve, each with 39 people and 3 deployable elements. We are manned, trained, and equipped to DoD/US Cybercom standards, but we are also cross-trained with CISA, FBI, and other federal agencies. We have 3 primary missions from critical infrastructure partners. We do threat hunting, assessments, which are like penetration testing, and incident response, which are all free for the receiving organization. Additionally, because of our expertise in maritime critical infrastructure, we are often asked to deploy forward with US Cyber and the Joint Force and execute missions abroad. The case we argue in this presentation and in our report is that ship-to-shore cranes manufactured in China present a risk to the marine transportation system. The U.S. is dependent on cranes manufactured by a single Chinese state-owned enterprise, which could present a significant supply chain risk. Additionally, Coast Guard Cyber Protection Teams have spent more time analyzing operational crane environments than any other federal agency, and we have observed vulnerabilities that a threat actor could take advantage of to exploit and disrupt port operations. So why cranes? Maybe you've seen some of these headlines. Maritime transit is the primary method which goods move about the world. 70% of non-bulk cargo is moved by shipping containers, and 70% of the world's and 80% of the US's cranes are made by a single Chinese state-owned enterprise, Shanghai Zhenhai Heavy Industries, or otherwise known as ZPMC. Additionally, there's been significant congressional interest in ZPMC with the Congressional Committee on CCP doing an investigation and releasing a report back in 2024.
Where are the cranes? Well, here's a graphic of where they are, basically everywhere. So all of the top 10 US ports by value have them except for one, which is Savannah, Georgia, and nearly all of our national strategic seaports have them. National strategic seaports are ports specifically designated to help with the movement of troops and equipment in a national defense situation. But what's the big deal? Well, first, let's start by understanding what a Chinese state-owned enterprise is. So these are companies controlled by the government of China that have access to reduced cost labor and subsidized pricing for important things like steel. And especially those Chinese state-owned enterprises that work in critical infrastructure sectors, they're required to comply with the Chinese government, give their source code to the Chinese government, and store their data in China. Now let's look for some motivation in the supply chain attacks. On the software side, we probably all know or lived SolarWinds in 2020. You know, that little time the Russian FSB compromised the SolarWinds software in order to conduct espionage against the US government. Thanks for that. The next was the Cisco equipment event in the mid-2010s, where the US government unwittingly procured hundreds of millions of dollars in counterfeit Cisco equipment manufactured in China and Hong Kong, and then put them into use in some really sensitive places like military aircraft. Now let's draw a parallel. We actually made specific efforts to ban Huawei equipment in our critical infrastructure in an effort to mitigate supply chain risks. However, we all saw Salt Typhoon compromised a majority of our cellular infrastructure despite this. So the question is, if we had Huawei infrastructure, would we have ever been able to detect them? And how much easier would it have been to compromise our critical infrastructure? So with all that, it's not hard to be worried about cranes. While these cranes incorporate a number of non-Chinese components, they're entirely assembled in China and then installed by ZPMC employees, with the majority of major maintenance work done by ZPMC employees. The company that sells these cranes is required to completely comply with the government of China, and China has a history of trying to compromise our critical infrastructure. Okay, so what are we doing about it? Well, quite a lot, actually. So your Coast Guard cyber protection teams have been the primary leading government resource doing technical cybersecurity work on these cranes. We have hundreds of days censoring cranes across multiple ports, and we have more time analyzing these crane data than any other federal agencies. And our crane missions have spanned all three mission profiles that we do: assessment, hunt, and incident response. But first, let's start by understanding what is a crane? So here's a picture of a ship-to-shore crane, as you can see on the right-hand side. And so first, the big yellow structure is called the gantry. It sits on wheels and rolls along the road, or what's called the quay. In the upper left-hand side, you see the equipment house. That's where the majority of networking and compute hardware is stored, and it's where the humongous electrical drives are. The horizontal red structure is the boom, and on top of the boom is a trolley, which is a little car that runs along the boom. Attached to the trolley is a thing called a spreader, which is the claw that actually grabs the container and lets it go. And then the cabin is where your crane operator sits, and that's where the primary human-machine interface, or HMI, for the crane sits, called the crane monitoring station. There can also be crane monitoring stations in the equipment house, in the base of the crane, sometimes even off the crane. And then you have the elevator, because who likes taking the stairs? So first, let's understand the attack surface of a crane by understanding modern crane features. As you might guess, modern technology makes operating your crane and operating your port easier than ever. First thing you have is assisted control systems. So no longer does your crane operator need to account for the swing of a container and catch it in order to safely maneuver it between places. Now you have a suite of sensors that feed a control theoretic model that automatically stabilize the movement of your container. More computers. Next is optical character recognition. Your crane is equipped with many cameras designed to read the size of containers. This then feeds a port's terminal operating system, which is the core logistics system that runs all movement of all containers at a given port. Next is remote control. Here's a picture of a remote control for your crane. We haven't actually done any wireless analysis or electronic analysis here, but anytime you introduce wireless, you potentially have attack surface. Then you have fully autonomous cranes. We actually don't have many of these here in the United States, but China actually has several fully automated container ports enabled by Huawei. And then protocols. What do we normally see? So we see on the operational technology side, mostly Profinet and link layer discovery protocol. But if you've seen a crane, you've seen one crane. So depending on the generation, even within the ZPMC crane world, could be completely different. So you might see some weird proprietary Modbus thing also. Now let's look at the logical structure of a crane. So at the center of everything here is the industrial router. This is typically an ABB branded device, but not always. And it talks to IT kind of hosts via Ethernet over IP. And these are typically cameras and landside servers and the larger crane network. On the operational technology side, we typically see 2 managed switches and a primary PLC for each crane. So we normally see a managed switch dedicated to the monitoring and control of the crane itself, and a managed switch just for the humongous electrical drives. And no matter what's going on, all of the little OT devices, pictured here by tiny supercomputers, are constantly sending traffic to the primary PLC. So it's very chatty. And the primary PLC control stores the main configuration for all the devices on the crane. And so we've mentioned Profinet a few times. And for all you non-OT people here, Profinet is interesting because there's no IP. So pictured here in red and green are source and destination MAC addresses, and in blue is payload. So this is great for real-time systems where your payload goes directly to the application layer, but it's interesting, and the reason we highlight it is because threat hunting on a crane without IP can actually be a little challenging. So here are some tips for hunting on your crane at home. So in order to capture the lowest level traffic possible, we wanted to make mirror ports on the industrial router. That actually only gave us layer 3 traffic, so great for understanding what's going on with the cameras and then remote connections from the IT portion of a network or the greater crane network, but not great for understanding baseline activity in Profinet world. So in order to do this, you actually need to create mirror ports on each of the managed switches in order to capture all that Profinet. And then on top of that, analyzing Profinet can be a little challenging too. We even found like our specific OT tools were not good at visualizing non-IP based traffic. So what we had to do is ingest all of our network data into our SIEM, do visualizations in our SIEM, and then cross-reference that visualization with the configuration file, the master configuration file on the primary PLC to understand everything that was going on. So take that for your crane hunt at home.
Okay. Now I'm going to rapid fire through some of our most common findings. For anyone that's worked in operational technology environments, these will not be surprising. They're not all unique to cranes. And I'll just note that these findings come from us assessing cranes, how they were implemented in their operational environment, so not doing application level testing or anything like that. So first we have improper network segmentation. Too often we find network flow for organizations does not match what the partner is expecting or what they have documented. Any unmanaged or unknown channels presents a huge risk and a potential ingress vector for a malicious actor to take advantage of. Proper network segmentation is often one of the most important technical controls for mitigating large-scale cyber incidents. Legacy protocols, very common in operational technology environments and sometimes technically necessary. It was less concerning in the days where these networks were fully air-gapped and physical security was your primary method for network security in the OT environment. But now with more integration between IT and OT, this has become a bigger risk. Implementing things like Profinet with sign and encrypt for messaging can go a long way to protecting your OT environment. End-of-life OS, another common finding in OT environments, and again, a lot of times technically necessary. Recognize that upgrading and updating in these systems and in these environments can present a lot of unique challenges, and so just recommend putting compensating controls in place where you cannot do regular updates. And then shared accounts. This is one of the most common findings we have with our crane hunts and assessments. On the screen, you see one example posted on a sticky note. This is up in the equipment house on a crane. We have the credentials for a shared admin account that everyone uses. Another threat hunt we did, they had one set of credentials for literally everything. So every operator at the port and their third-party remote maintenance operators used the same set of credentials that had admin privileges for everything. When we were doing the threat hunt, when we see they didn't tell us that to us ahead of time, so we caught a foreign address logging into their crane with what we thought were local admin credentials. We were very concerned. After talking with the partner and getting the full story, we were still concerned, but just for a different reason.
So remember these headlines from earlier? This was us. Thank you. So surprise cellular modems on your crane, certainly a finding. And we're not saying these were planted here maliciously necessarily, but these were completely unknown to the crane owner, which makes them a risk. Where were they? Okay, so we found them on the elevators and the spreaders. And when we say on the spreaders, we mean you literally had to walk all the way out on the boom, which is scary, and look down in order to find the cellular modems. In both cases, the cellular modems were connected directly to the OT devices on those pieces, completely bypassing all other access management and monitoring solutions. And then here for completeness, the congressional investigation also found an instance of cellular modems in the server room offsite that sits on a crane's network.
Okay, on to potential attack paths. So there are various different attack paths a threat actor could take advantage of to disrupt port operations. The one we've hinted at here, and it's probably the most concerning, is a supply chain-induced attack, where a threat actor takes advantage of the supply chain, introduces a persistent mechanism, and can skip right to delivering effects. But the other attack paths that exist are more akin to a normal attack path you see in any cyber incident. Initial access through phishing or drive-by compromise, lateral movement to resources that have access to the crane and OT environment, and then privilege escalation, and then setting up persistence before you deliver effects. And so what do effects on delivering effects to cranes look like? There's a wide range of cyber effects that could be delivered to cranes, ranging and varying based on their complexity to implement. So the first tier, we have things like data exfiltration or manipulation, which could be used as part of smuggling operations to manipulate crane container tracking. Or we have accessing the OCR for cyber espionage, or also part of a smuggling operation. The next tier, we have things like ransomware or denial of service. If the crane management system, the terminal operating system, or any crane container tracking systems are encrypted or unavailable, then port operations are going to slow down. Most ports have the ability to switch to manual operations, but it's still going to slow down the goods moving in and out of that terminal. And then lastly, we have physical disruption. I think this usually invokes cranes spinning wildly out of control, throwing containers, things on fire. In reality, it would be more like locking out the spreader so that the crane can no longer pick up containers, or manipulating the safe operating parameters so the crane operates outside them, damages itself, and becomes inoperable over time. All this begs the question, have we seen any malicious cyber activity on these cranes? The short answer is no. While we have seen significant vulnerabilities that a malicious actor could take advantage of to disrupt port operations, we haven't seen any active malicious cyber activity on the physical cranes. There's a couple of reasons for this. The first is most of our missions have been focused on identifying vulnerabilities, so our assessment missions. The second part is that we'd expect any malicious cyber activity to take the form of living off the land, using built-in crane features to blend in with the environment. Without some of the best practices, best cyber hygiene practices like centralized logging, non-repudiation, identifying good activity from bad is almost nearly impossible. All this highlights the importance of reducing supply chain-induced attack vectors like cellular modems or permanent open remote access channels for maintenance.
So quickly, some best practices for you so you can secure your crane at home. First thing is scrutinize contract language. So we've seen that ZPMC requires third-party remote access in many cases for the contract for maintenance, and our most diligent partners have argued this language out of their contracts. So that's the critical first step. The second is generally stopping remote access to your crane networks. So whether that's sweeping your cranes for surprise cellular modems or making sure you can't access cranes from the IT part of your network. And then finally, implement your standard cybersecurity best practices. So scan and patch where you can, implement logging, implement identity and access management, make sure you're not storing plain text credentials to your crane on the IT portion of a network in an open share that anyone can access, because we would never see that, right? But for this and more, we're going to be coming out with a standalone crane paper right after this talk with a lot more details about findings. And so thank you for coming. Thank you for your attention today. Big thanks to our teams going out there and doing the mission. And big thanks to Lieutenant Josh Hokum for his contributions to this talk. Thank you.